We need to make sure that every working class family in America, every working class person in America receives $2,000 a month until this crisis is over.
During a speech on the Senate floor on Thursday, Bernie Sanders slammed Republicans for putting up a bill that doesn't actually help people, while also offering up his vision for what people should be receiving right now. So I'm going to get to that second clip in a bit. First, here is the clip of Bernie Sanders discussing the BS bill that Republicans have put up.
The Senate Republican bill provides nothing for rent, nothing for mortgages, nothing for food, nothing for hazard pay, nothing for health care, nothing for public transportation, and nothing to prevent the mass layoffs of teachers, nurses, firefighters, and construction workers that will take place as cities and states struggle economically. In other words, the same Republicans who had no problem voting for a $1 trillion tax break for the top 1% large corporations 2 years ago are now telling 40 million Americans who are struggling to pay for housing that we cannot afford to help them pay their rent or mortgage. Same Republicans who just voted to provide $740 billion for the Pentagon and the military-industrial complex to wage endless wars are now telling 30 million workers who lost their jobs that we cannot afford to continue the $600 a week supplement they were receiving in unemployment benefits. The same Republicans who slipped a $135 billion tax break for multimillionaires and billionaires into the last coronavirus relief package are now telling 29 million Americans who do not have enough food to eat that we cannot afford to help them feed their families.
Now, all of what Bernie Sanders said there is 100% correct. But you will still see Republicans pretend like the Democrats are the ones that are preventing people from getting real help. Democrats are pushing for $3 trillion in aid. Meanwhile, Republicans offered up $300 billion. That has no real financial help, no real health care for people. In fact, their priority is for businesses, protecting businesses against liability lawsuits. So let me get to that piece here from CNBC. The bill would renew a federal unemployment benefit, but at a lower level than Democrats sought. So Republicans were going for $300 as opposed to Democrats who were continuing to fight for the $600 that people on unemployment have been receiving. It also would set new protections for businesses against liability lawsuits during the pandemic, which Democrats have labeled a poison pill. Protection for businesses against liability lawsuits. That's the Republican priority. People are being evicted from their homes, including people that have jobs still. Lost their job during the pandemic, got a new job, but they're not being paid enough to be able to afford the rent. So instead of focusing on helping people that are being evicted, helping families that have no money, no food, their focus is on protecting businesses against liability lawsuits in case a business doesn't do enough to protect their employees from getting the coronavirus. It really is disgusting. And I'm going to get to a quote from Mitch McConnell here in a second that shows you how they're trying to frame this. But also, federal aid to reverse deep public sector cuts is needed, including in education. Public education has been gutted during this time. So as of August, about 1.1 million public sector workers had lost their jobs since February, an estimated 668,000, 59% of them in education. About 462,000 of the lost education jobs were in K-12 schools, with most of the rest in colleges and universities. So you see here much needed aid for states and education in general. Of course, nothing in this bill addressing that. And here's the quote from Mitch McConnell. Today, every senator will either say they want to send families the relief we can agree to, or they can send families nothing. So while basically offering families nothing, cutting their benefits in half during this time, while nothing has improved for any of these people, for people dealing with this virus, dealing with this pandemic, losing their jobs. Nothing has improved, yet they want to cut the benefits to people while protecting businesses. And McConnell says, well, we can either agree to this or families get nothing. And you will still see, if you look up this bill, whether on, Breitbart, Daily Wire, some conservative website, they will frame it in a way that Democrats are the ones that are blocking help to people. When it's clear what the priority is right now for Republicans. Now, let me get to Bernie Sanders here, the second clip, and what he thinks people need right now.
We need to extend the extra $600 a week in unemployment benefits for the 30 million Americans who have lost their jobs, like the House passed over 3 months ago. This is absolutely essential. It will give families during this crisis the income they need to live with dignity. We need to make sure that every working class family in America, every working class person in America, receives $2,000 a month until this crisis is over, so they can pay the rent and put food on the table. We need to expand Medicare to all of the 92 million Americans who are uninsured or underinsured. Nobody should be unable to go to a doctor during this crisis because they don't have health insurance. In other words, we need a coronavirus relief bill that benefits the working families of this country and low-income people, not just the wealthy and well-connected. Now, I know what my Republican colleagues will say, that it's too expensive, that we can't afford it. Well, maybe, just maybe, if my Republican colleagues were so concerned about the deficit, they might want to ask their billionaire campaign contributors to pay their fair share of taxes instead of giving them massive tax breaks. Mr. President, in the midst of the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression and the worst public health crisis in more than 100 years, I think that most Americans would be shocked to learn that 467 billionaires in our country have seen their wealth go up by $800 billion during the pandemic.
Now, what Bernie Sanders discussed here would be called radical left. It's radical. It's incredibly radical to ensure that people have health care. It's radical to make sure people are not going hungry. It's radical to help people during a pandemic when they lost their job. That's radical. What's not radical is protecting large companies from liability lawsuits. What's not radical is cutting their benefits in half. Somehow that's not radical. To go over some of the agenda here that he mentioned, extending $600 a week to 30 million unemployed workers, providing $2,000 a month to every working class person, expand Medicare to all, tax 60% of the $800 billion in windfall profits 467 billionaires made during the pandemic. This is the most moderate proposal possible. This is the bare minimum. If you look at other countries around the world, they're taking care of their people. To give you some examples here, Spain creates a universal minimum income targeted at 2.3 million people. And that's in addition to other financial benefits that people are receiving there. And I shouldn't say benefits, financial protections, because these people clearly, it's during a pandemic, you lose your job. ABC News here, French government to continue paying up to 84% of salaries for furloughed workers until next summer. This is the government just straight up protecting their workers, paying their salaries. And part of this, of course, got to mention, unions are a major piece of this. This is why the French government has been forced to actually give the people what they need. Because you have strong unions in France that actually stand up for the average worker. And Canada, of course, you get $2,000 a month, CERB, if you've been impacted by the coronavirus. This is not a UBI, but most people are able to get the $2,000 a month here if you've been impacted by the virus in some fashion. And that's in addition to wage subsidy for companies and other various ways that they've been helping people. So, and by the way, this also is not enough. What Canada's doing is not enough, which is why I say this is the bare minimum. This is the bare minimum. And this is considered to be radical in the US. The conversation in America is completely twisted, and not even just from Republicans. Democrats, of course, also don't support this bill. It's basically Bernie Sanders, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, the Just Democrats. That's it. The media, of course, doesn't treat this debate in a objective manner that's actually objective to the facts and on the side of the people. No, just they look at this as, oh, Democrats and Republicans can't get along. Oh, well, what else is new? There has to be some real clarity here, some perspective. If the media was doing its job properly, they would be bringing in, discussing what other countries are doing, how they're helping their people. But we're how long into this pandemic now? 6, 7 months? People are still suffering, even with what they had? And Republicans trying to cut that in half? I guess on the bright side, there's at least one person in the Senate that's fighting for you.